Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Tweed Vu with KQED. I host KQED Newsroom on Channel 9, Fridays at 7 p.m. And we just had Phil Ting on yesterday, as a matter of fact. And we've had Scott Wiener and David Chiu on the show in the past as well. So it's great to see all of you coming out to here today, spending your Saturday being a part of this process with us and attending this town hall. We are very happy to be here and have the support of UC Hastings College of the Law for this year's joint town hall with Assembly members David Chiu, Phil Ting, and Senator Scott Wiener. This is the first joint town hall of this year. They've only done this joint town hall once before in 2017, so this is a special event today, and we certainly appreciate your time and your effort to do this. We'd like to thank the staff and team at UC Hastings for hosting us today and for giving San Francisco and San Mateo County residents the opportunity to speak and to hear directly from our elected representatives. And if you see the cameras here, we are live streaming this as well, so we want to thank all of you in this room and those watching via live stream for tuning in and turning out to participate in this democratic process. Now, for today's format at the town hall, I will start off by asking 2 questions directed to all the members, and then we will open it up to you for your audience questions, because today is very much about you and what you want to know and hear from your elected representatives. If you have a question, you can please raise your hand, and staff on both sides will come and wave to you, and you wave to them, and they will come to you with the microphone so you can ask your questions. But again, I will give them a chance to make some statements. I'll ask them a couple of questions, and then we'll proceed with a Q&A. But before we begin with the rest of the program, I would like to start off by introducing UC Hastings Chancellor and Dean David Fakeman. He will make a few remarks. Chancellor.
Thank you very much. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to UC Hastings Law, and we are very proud to welcome this town hall discussion to our campus. As many of you know, UC Hastings is a San Francisco and California institution. Founded over 140 years ago, UC Hastings has educated many of the cities, the states, and the nation's political leaders, including Senator Kamala Harris, U.S. Congresswoman Jackie Speer, and former California Speaker and San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. Although UC Hastings has a storied past, we are building a campus for the future. We are building affordable student housing for over 1,000 graduate students of UC Hastings and UCSF. In addition, we're expanding our campus to embrace partner universities, including UCSF and UC Berkeley, and many others. And I might add, we have embarked on this building campaign without displacing one resident in the area. We have been and intend to continue to be a good neighbor and a constant resource for the city of San Francisco, the state of California, the nation at large, and the greater global community. I'm also personally proud to welcome this discussion because my teaching and scholarship are in the area of constitutional law, and we live in a time when fundamental constitutional principles are under stress. As a society, we have much to discuss and debate, and only through such discourse can real progress be made. The United States Constitution places free speech in a privileged position. It is not because speech matters little or does not have the power to hurt or to incite or to lead to fundamental change. It is because speech matters a lot. The pen, after all, is mightier than the sword. Words have tremendous potential to do both harm and good. Why then should expression have greater immunity from government regulation than most other forms of human conduct? And there are many suggested answers to this question, one of which, most famously, is the idea of the marketplace of ideas. Oliver Wendell Holmes, in the famous case of Abrams versus United States, wrote the following: "When men have realized that time has upset many fighting faiths, they may come to believe even more than they believe the very foundations of their own conduct, that the ultimate good desired is better reached by free trade in ideas, that the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition of the market, and that truth is the only ground upon which their wishes safely can be carried out. That, at any rate, is the theory of our Constitution. It is an experiment, as all life is an experiment." And with those words, I'll leave it to this august panel Again, I welcome you all here to UC Hastings, and I wish you Godspeed in this discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor, for that warm welcome and for allowing us to be here at UC Hastings today. Next, I would like to invite Supervisor Matt Haney. He represents District 6, which includes the region where we are right now, and he's going to make a few remarks. Supervisor.
All right. First of all, good morning, everyone, and welcome to District 6. Are there any District 6 folks who are in here? All right, I see some of you here. To the rest of you, welcome to our district. We are not just in the home of the districts of our illustrious state representatives, but here in District 6, I represent this area on the Board of Supervisors. I was elected just a few months ago and have been in office for the last just about 3 months. I was warned by some of these folks as I took this path about some of the challenges of representing our city and dealing with some of the barriers to change in City Hall. But what I can say is that I'm very grateful that this conversation is happening here in District 6 and here in the Tenderloin. I live just a few blocks from here. I live on Hyde and Eddy, just about 3 blocks from here in the Tenderloin. And for anyone who is familiar with this community, I think it represents both the tremendous challenges that we face as a city and also the opportunities that we have. We in District 6 have the majority of people on our streets who are living without homes, who are forced to live on our streets and sidewalks rather than in housing. This is something that I hope that we're going to hear from our state legislators because we need to do more locally. I'm pushing for what I hope will be $1 billion affordable housing bond so that we can build more housing to get people inside. For a new navigation center, which I hope will be part of the solution on the waterfront. And an end to the approaches that have failed us. The sweeps, especially during the rain and extreme weather, have not been a part of the solution, and we need to do better. I also, the area around where we are right now is home to a huge part of our challenges around addiction and overdose. And I want to thank the leadership of our representatives for taking on this challenge of getting folks treatment rather than criminalization. This week on Thursday at 10 a.m. at the Board of Supervisors are going to be hearing support for the new version of the overdose prevention, also known as the safe injection sites legislation. So I want to thank you all for your leadership on that, and it's something that we need more than ever. Last thing I want to say is and I want to appreciate the approach that really moves us away from criminalization and into treatment. We have a juvenile hall here in San Francisco that is continuing to jail kids at a huge cost with poor results. So on Tuesday, we're announcing legislation that will close juvenile hall here in San Francisco. And I want to ask for our legislators for their support in making sure we have alternatives, and I know that they believed in that. So I want to thank you, the 3 of you, for being here. I want to thank you for your leadership. I want to thank you for your partnership and for holding this forum here. We will work with you on all of the many priorities that you have because the challenges that we face as a city, which you know very well, could not be greater. So thank you for the 3 of you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Haney. And I have to just add to that real quickly. I came here as a refugee from Vietnam at the end of the war with my family. I came here on a boat. And so I used to live in San Francisco for 5 years and frequently visited the Tenderloin. So I know it's an area that has its challenges, but I can also personally say that it's an area full of people who are incredible and so committed to their communities. And I want to acknowledge all of you and the people in that amazing neighborhood for how much people care and how much compassion there is in the Tenderloin. So thank you. So now I would also like to acknowledge someone else who is from Supervisor Safayi's office today. Thank you for your representation. Monica, can you stand up and wave hi? Monica, thank you for being here with us. from Supervisor Safi's office. And now let's jump into the reason why we are all here, and that is to hear from our 3 elected representatives. I'm going to do a brief introduction for each member, and then they will each make a few remarks, and we will then start with the questions. Let's start with Senator Scott Wiener. He represents San Francisco and northern San Mateo County in the California State Senate. Elected in 2016, Senator Wiener focuses extensively on housing, transportation, civil rights, criminal justice reform, clean energy, and alleviating poverty. He chairs the Senate Housing Committee. Before being elected to the Senate, Senator Wiener served as a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, representing the district previously represented by Harvey Milk, and chaired the San Francisco County's Transportation Authority. Before being elected to office, he practiced law for 15 years, including nearly a decade as a deputy city attorney in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. He also served in a number of community leadership roles, including co-chair of the San Francisco LGBT Community Center and on the National Board of Directors of the Human Rights Campaign. Senator Wiener has lived in San Francisco's Castro neighborhood since 1997. He received degrees from Duke University and Harvard Law School. Senator Wiener.
Thank you. Thank you to the lovers and the haters. It's all good. That's what democracy is about. So 2 years ago, almost exactly, the three of us, the three.
But can we please let? We're gonna. We will have time for Q&A after they make their remarks. Thank you. Thank you. If you can respect the crowd, please respect everyone else here and let them hear from the elected representatives. Thank you.
When we talk about mental health issues during this town hall, I look forward to talking about why it's not progressive to let people die on our streets. I look forward to talking about how it's not progressive to let people die on our streets. That is not progressive. And I want to thank Mayor Breed and Supervisor Mandelman.
Sir, please sit. We will get to your question at the end. Sir, please sit.
Okay. So 2 years ago at Mission High School, the three of us held our first community town hall, the three of us together. And at the time, it was right after Donald Trump had taken office. And it was right after Donald Trump took office. And there was so much focus on the attacks that our president was really launching against our community, against our city, against our values.
Excuse me, man, excuse me. Ma'am, excuse me. My name is Mark Checkelbane. I am a 27-year employee of the legislature. This has got to be my 150th town hall, at least. The way that this is going to work is each legislator is going to get 3 minutes to talk. There is going to be ample time for questions. The microphone will be brought to people in the audience. I have to ask you to please respect the process, your community members, so that everyone has an opportunity to speak, and this can proceed.
Okay, now where were we? What?
So I know the legislators really want to have a productive day where they get input from the community and answer questions. This is the last warning. If we can't proceed, the town hall is going to end, and we are going to, and people can certainly try and get meetings with legislators and find other ways to communicate. They would really like to have a meeting today where people are here to answer questions. Again, if this continues, the town hall will end.
If I could just suggest, we are all happy to sit down with the opposition for any of the bills we're talking about, particularly and including the conservatorship law. And so I know our colleagues, we will all be happy to meet with you, those of you who feel strongly about the conservatorship laws. But again, if you continue to shout down the proceedings, we won't be able to proceed. At this moment, we've already burned 25 minutes of a 90-minute session, and we really would like to have a conversation on the many issues impacting San Francisco. So again, to the organizers of the opposition to the conservatorship law, that is our request of you. We will commit that we will meet with you, but we're asking you to give us a chance to engage in conversation about other issues.
So Senator Wiener will continue to make his 3 minutes worth of remarks, and let's proceed.
It's a long 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, 2 years ago when we were at Mission High School, the three of us, it was right after Donald Trump took office, and we were all very, very focused on the attacks that we were seeing coming from Washington, D.C. around immigration, against LGBT people, against women, against healthcare, and so forth. And that was the real focus. And at the time, we also talked about whatever huge problems this guy was causing us, we have our own problems here in California that we have to address. And as we are seeing here today, with a lot of the passion in this room on many different issues, we have been doing that work, and we are having those debates both in the Capitol and here locally around how we solve our housing crisis, around how we help homeless people off the streets, how we address untreated mental illness and addiction, about how we rebuild our infrastructure here in California, and about how we reform our criminal justice system to reduce mass incarceration and reduce the number of police-involved shootings. We're going to continue to do that work. I look forward to the conversation today about those California issues that we need to solve here in California at the same time that we're fighting what's-his-name. So I look forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wiener. Next, I would like to introduce Assemblymember David Chiu. Assemblymember Chiu was elected to the California State Legislature in 2014 to represent the 17th Assembly District. It encompasses the eastern half of San Francisco. He's currently the chair of the Assembly Housing and Community Development Committee and is the new chair of the Asian and Pacific Island Legislative Caucus. In the past 4 years, Assemblyman Chiu has had 48 bills signed into law, which among other things, yes, you can clap for that. That's quite an accomplishment. Which, among other things, address the state's housing and homelessness crises, bolster protection for immigrant workers and tenants, work to reduce the backlog of untested rape kits, assisted LGBT families, promoted sustainable transportation options. Before joining the State Assembly, David Chiu served as president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors for 6 years and represented District 3. And as supervisor, he authored ordinances across a wide range of policy areas, including affordable housing, job creation, public safety, healthcare, the environment, transportation, civil rights, language access, ethics, and technology. Assemblyman Chiu.
Thank you, Twee. Good morning, San Francisco. I want to just take a moment and thank Hastings for helping to host us, Twee Vu for spending time with us today, and thank all of you for taking time on a busy Saturday morning to engage in the issues of the day. It's great to be back home after a long week in Sacramento. I think all three of us desperately miss being in our communities when we're in Sacramento during the week. And one thing I always like to brag to our colleagues in Sacramento is how informed, how active, and how engaged our San Francisco residents are. You've reminded us of that again right today. Thank you for that. As Senator Wiener just said, I think for all of us, we view our responsibility these days as both ensuring that we are tackling the biggest challenges facing San Francisco and California, as well as defending our communities and defending our values against what is happening to us because of the current occupant in the White House. And so this year I have introduced a number of bills in topics that you would imagine. A number of bills in housing as the chair of the Assembly Housing Committee, in transportation and congestion, addressing the fact that we have to protect our environment, we have to ensure that everyone has access to health care, we need to protect the diversity and the civil rights of everyone in our community, regardless of your sexual orientation, regardless of what country you immigrated from, regardless of your beliefs, and we need to do this all at the same time. And one thing I will also share is to the rest of the state and to the rest of the country, we are at our best when we come together around our shared San Francisco values. We often will have many debates about what that means, and I think it is our job as your elected officials and your policymakers to do everything we can to figure out how we bridge these differences, how we bring folks together, and then ultimately, how do we come to consensus around new and bold and innovative and progressive ideas that address the challenges of the day. I will tell you that we are pilloried outside of the city and outside of the state by those who criticize the fact that we are one of the wealthiest cities in the world, and yet we have the highest homelessness rates that we have ever seen in recent history. We have very intense poverty rates, and we clearly have a housing and homelessness crisis that we have yet been able to tackle. And so I very much today, for the last 4 years as I've served as one of your assembly members and into the future, look forward to engaging with each and every one of you to figure out how we build that consensus so that San Francisco continue to be a beacon of all the things that we care about to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman Chiu. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Assemblyman Phil Ting. He was first elected to the legislature in 2012 and represents the 19th district. That encompasses the west side of San Francisco and parts of northern San Mateo County. Among other leadership roles, he currently chairs the powerful Assembly Budget Committee. His legislative successes include making it easier to obtain Cal grants so that more students can pursue a higher education, funding solutions for our statewide homeless crisis, requiring disclosure of peace officer body camera footage, and enacting the nation's most inclusive restroom law for the LGBTQ community. You can clap on that. That gains national attention. This year, Ting's priorities aim to lift more Californians out of poverty, help families find affordable housing, keep college affordable, and move the state toward clean cars. Assemblyman Ting.
Thank you, Twee. Thank you, Twee. I also want to just thank my Senate colleague and my other Assembly member colleague. It's been really great to the three of us working together on a variety of issues. And I think David put it very well, where as San Franciscans, we have learned so much about really serving this city for so many years and working in the community, working with many nonprofits, working with key stakeholder groups, that we go to Sacramento very well trained in what we're fighting for. And ultimately, what we are fighting for is making sure that everybody, regardless of what family they're born into, regardless of how they got to this state or how they got to this city, has an equal chance to really get a slice of that American dream. And for us, that seems to be harder every single day. I know San Francisco is very different than the San Francisco I came to over 30 years ago. And even the state that I've grown up in my entire life has changed. We at times have been able to make a huge amount of wealth, develop amazing technology, but it seems for people who are working every single day, for people who are just scraping by. It's harder and harder to own a home. It's harder and harder to even rent a home. And so those are many of the challenges that we are struggling with. We have the 5th largest economy in the entire world. California does. There are only 4 economies larger than us. Ours, Germany, China, and Japan. And at the same time, we have 20% of our people live in poverty. And that doesn't even count everybody else who feels like they're just scraping by. So for me, a lot of my focus, as well as on housing, homelessness, the environment, a lot of my focus as chair of our budget committee is really how do we reinvest in social infrastructure? And that social infrastructure to me is education. It's education starting from early education all the way from higher education. It is around healthcare. It's making sure that everybody, and we mean every single person, has access to healthcare. It also means it also means not making poverty a crime. That people who are poor, sometimes they immigrate here poor, sometimes they are born poor. But that is not a crime in California, and that is something that we continue to want to fight against, but we don't want to punish the people who are in those circumstances. We want to figure out how to work with them to get them into the middle class and really get them into a much more stable life. So much of our focus, the 3 of us, but really the state has been very much focused on writing a different story than the narrative that is in D.C. It is a narrative that we don't have to debate whether we have clean air or strong economy. We can have both, and we've demonstrated that in California. It also demonstrates that we don't have to shut down our borders. We're continuing to welcome everybody. We want to welcome everybody because we believe in San Francisco, in California, that really all of us are stronger when we welcome everybody. So with that, I just want to thank all of you for coming out on a drizzly Saturday morning to come talk to us about all the various issues you care about. It is, as David said earlier, it is so great to be home, and we're very excited for a very lively discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks to all 3 of you for those introductory remarks. So I'm going to toss out the first question now, and if I can ask you to please limit your answers to 3 minutes as well, just so that we can keep things rolling along and make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So my first question to you, all 3 of you, is what are your top priorities for this legislative session? Senator Wiener, let's start with you.
Sure. Excuse me. For me, the top...
So you have a choice. You please sit down. Please sit down or we will end this. So you have 2 choices. Please be respectful or we end this. Thank you. Senator Wiener?
Thank you, Tui. So for me, the top priorities this legislative session are housing, homelessness, and criminal justice reform. There you go. And we have, as I think, whatever people's differing perspectives, we have a terrible housing crisis, not just in San Francisco, but throughout the state, and it's really damaging the fabric of our community. And so we are working hard, actually all 3 of us, on trying to move the dial in housing. And there's a lot of energy this year, particularly with Governor Newsom prioritizing housing to move an aggressive agenda on housing. I grew up a Queen fan, so thank you for that rendition. And so I think we're going to see a lot of work this year to try to increase investment in affordable housing, and we're already seeing that in the proposed budget, to try to expand tenant protections, to make sure that we are having enough housing and creating the ability to create enough housing in the state of California, because we have a 3.5 million home deficit. I'm authoring a bill, Senate Bill 50, and for once, and there we go. So that we can finally break exclusionary segregation, so that we can finally break exclusionary segregation zoning in the state of California that has pushed us off the housing cliff. We are also working on Senate Bill 48, which will streamline navigation centers and homeless shelters to make sure that every homeless person in California on their way to housing can have a place to actually sleep. There are big swaths of California with 0 shelter beds, or shelter beds that are only open in the winter, or almost nothing. And we have half of the unhoused or the unsheltered homeless people in the U.S. are in California. It's unacceptable, and we have to make sure that every community actually provides navigation center or shelter access to homeless people, including in San Francisco. We're also working this year on continuing our progress on criminal justice reform. I'm authoring a bill, sb40, to eliminate one of the most common sentencing enhancements that significantly increases our prison population, and just getting rid of that sentencing enhancement entirely. We are reforming the sex offender registry to stop discriminating against LGBT people, and we have a bill to ensure that transgender incarcerated people are able to be housed according to their gender identity, as opposed to what they were, the gender that was assigned to them at birth, because we know that trans women in particular who are classified and housed in prison as men are then horribly victimized. And so we need to make sure that we're respecting all prisoners, including our transgender prisoners. We also this year have a very aggressive clean energy bill, SB288, to try to make it easier for people to have solar energy or other forms of clean energy without our utilities like PG&E stopping people from actually generating that clean energy. So we have a lot of work we're doing this year, and I think we're going to have a good one.
Sorry. Okay, there. All right. So with only 3 minutes, I hope we have a chance to talk about ideas that my office is moving to protect our environment and expand educational opportunities, ensure that patients are not surprise balance billed at SF General Hospital, as well as all of the fights that we're engaged in with regard to civil rights. But the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issues that I'm working on are housing and homelessness, housing and homelessness, housing and homelessness. As there are a number of bills that we're moving forward to, as our progressive and equity and tenant, as well as pro-housing and pro-legalization housing advocates want, to protect tenants where they're living, to preserve the housing we have, and to continue to produce more housing, referred to as the so-called 3 Ps. And let me start by saying that at the very top of that list, we have to protect the tens of thousands of residents in San Francisco and the 15 million tenants around the state of California who are one rent increase away from being evicted. And to that end, I am leading, along with a number of my colleagues, a package of bills to protect tenants, to expand protections around rent control, to ensure that protections, if someone is about to be evicted, there has to be a legitimate just cause for why that eviction might occur. And then the bill that I am leading on is a bill that would prohibit rent gouging in the state of California. We all hear stories, and I know this is not something where everyone agrees on this, but we all hear stories of not just the 5% or 10% rent increases, but the 20%, 50%, 100%, 200% rent increases. In the state of California since the 1870s, there has been a law in the books that prevents price gouging after a natural disaster, a wildfire, or an earthquake. It says that you can't increase prices by more than 10% after that happens. We are proposing that there be a similar cap on price gouging, rent gouging, whereby tenants are protected from unexpectedly huge increases when it comes to their rents, but still allow property owners to maintain and receive a fair rate of return. This is going to be a challenging fight in the legislature, and we ask you to join us in helping to move this forward. I will also mention it's important for us to preserve housing and to build more affordable housing, and this is why I'm proposing a number of funding measures to move this forward. A significant increase in the affordable housing tax credit, bringing back the $1 billion of redevelopment funding that used to go to build affordable housing, ensuring that the Bay Area come together to finance affordable housing, because we are right now about $1.5 billion a year short in what we are not investing when it comes to affordable housing. Let me also just mention a few things when it comes to homelessness. Just in a few days, we will have our first hearing on a proposal that I'm leading on to ensure that the 60% of inmates in our county jail system who unfortunately have an addiction, a substance abuse issue, receive the help and the medication assistance that they need in our jail system, so that when they come out, they are clean, they are sober, and we can ensure that they are coming back to be productive members of our community. And I will also say, for the students who are here, we're here at Hastings. We know that in our community college system, in our California State University system, over 1 in 10 students are effectively homeless, sleeping in cars, taking showers in the gym, sleeping on the couches of their friends. We have proposed a bill to provide emergency financial aid to those students so they can afford to finish their schooling and get the jobs that they need, again, to be productive and integral parts of our workforce and our community. So we've many other issues and ideas that I look forward to talking about, but again, housing and homelessness, I think for all three of us, is top and center of what we are focused on in the legislature. Thank you.
Assemblymember Chiu, thank you. Mine's not working. Now it is. Assemblyman Ting, your priorities, please.
Thank you, Thuy. As my other two colleagues talked about, housing obviously is a priority for much of the state. I'm proud to be carrying two bills around making it easier to build accessory dwelling units and in-law units, as well as making sure that we build upon the legislation I did around surplus public land. We have so much surplus public land, making sure that affordable housing has the first right of refusal on that, and really reinforcing that. I was proud to get that bill signed. Now we're taking this bill a couple years ago, and now we're making sure that many of those loopholes were closed. 2 years ago, I was proud to author legislation working with the city to have Caltrans sell or rent the city at a very cheap rate, 10 different parcels around the city. And those have been turned into navigation centers, partly through much of the work that we've done with the city, but also with the state. The state, for the longest time, had really divested around housing and homelessness issues. And that's something that I've been championing primarily through the budget process, but making sure that San Francisco got its resources. We were able to get money for $10 million for 2 navigation centers a couple years ago. But then last year, we worked on getting $500 million for homelessness across the state, of which San Francisco got $27 million of that, to make sure that that could go to shelter, that could go to navigation centers, but it could also go to vouchers. We know that one of the parts is when people become homeless, if we can keep them off the streets rather than put them on the streets, then we have a higher chance of not having them be chronically homeless. So that's something that we continue to fight. There's a budget proposal in Governor Newsom's budget proposal that we are looking very closely at to see how it really complements what we were doing last year. But again, it's very much a priority to make sure that there are resources for affordable housing and homelessness in the budget. The other area I've been spending a lot of time in is really around environmental protection. We have passed some of the most groundbreaking environmental legislation over the last number of years. We've set very strict goals on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, but the one area where we have lost momentum, not gained momentum, is in the area of transportation. Transportation accounts for 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, and 80% of that transportation number is from all of us. It's from us driving cars. It is from, if you're shaking your head, that means you ride Muni. If you bike, if you walk, if you ride Muni, then you're doing great. But for everybody else, for everyone else driving gas cars, we're part of the problem. And so what I've been championing is really trying to push the state to really move toward clean cars and really aggressively look at our rebate program, look at really setting very strong goals on having clean cars, because only if we don't have clean cars, we're not going to have clean air. So that's really that simple. Lastly is really working in the area of civil rights. My colleague earlier talked about criminal justice reform. And if you look at that definition of insanity, where we have been doing the same thing over and over and over again and not getting any good results, that's really what you could characterize as our criminal justice system. So thanks very much in part to Governor Brown's leadership. We have really taken a hard look at people who really didn't need to be in jail and put the people who are low-level offenders, really put them back into the county system, really try to get them the help they need to get the rehabilitation they need, and we've made huge amounts of progress. That population has dropped significantly. The biggest challenge is, even though they are back out of our correction system, they're at home, but they can't get a job. They can't get housing because the records that they were supposed to have expunged, they don't have the time to do that. They don't have the resources to do that. So for millions of Californians who should be able to, who have paid their debt to society, should have their records cleaned, they don't have the ability to do that. So we're proposing in legislation, AB 1076, working with DA Gascon as well as Californians for Safety and Justice, a bill that actually streamlines government. And we're saying, hey, for once, government is really going to try to be streamlined and do our job so that you don't have to. And for pennies per the person, we're asking the Attorney General to develop a database. That database will be shared to every single county court up and down the state. And when people do background checks, the county court, all they have to do is just not respond, not give the information, because that person's background has been clean. We think this will help millions. We think this will help millions of Californians, but more importantly, this will help get millions of Californians out of our entitlement process. Why? Because they'll be able to get a job. Why? Because they'll be able to get housing. Why? Because they will become a productive member of society. When people have paid their debt, that debt, just like when you paid off your mortgage, that mortgage should not have to live forever once you paid it off. Once you paid your debt, you should be able to start your next life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this point, I'm going to stand up because I'm not that tall. I operate better when I'm standing up and can see all of you guys. I was supposed to ask all of you a second question, but I hope you don't mind if I just exercise my MC prerogative at this point due to time constraints and the various interruptions we've had. We're running behind schedule, so I'm going to scrap that second question, if that's okay with you, and go straight to Q&A, because this is about you, and I want to make sure that you have time to ask your questions. The staff members on the two sides, can you please wave so that people can spot you? So I'm going to try to be as fair as I can in terms of alternating between the different sides of the room and the front, the middle, and the back, okay? So why don't we start here with you, sir, in the second row, green shirt.
You hold it. Thank you all for being here. I'm very encouraged by all the activity that you guys are doing, very proactive. I'm trained as an economist. I know when Proposition 13 first came along, it was about 40% was residential revenues, 60% business. And that's reversed. And is this a third rail that none of you wish to touch, or is anyone in the legislature working on this to get a little bit more money into the counties where we have lots and lots of problems?
I'll start with a quick answer to that. I think our colleagues, we all believe that Prop 13 needs to be reformed. When Prop 13 was passed in the mid-1970s, California state schools were one of the top 10 funded school systems in the country and one of the top 10 performing school systems in the country. In recent years, 40 years later, we are bottom 10 and bottom 10 on both counts. We need to figure this out. There is a conversation that's happening at this very moment on what to do potentially around Prop 13. But if you care about this, we're going to need folks to organize and come together and figure out what the solution is going to be, because to your point, it typically is a third rail, and you're probably looking at 3 of not too many legislators who would be willing to say what I just said. And so again, we look forward to engaging with you on what it means to change up Prop 13 so we protect folks who do need protections in their homes, but we're ensuring that all of our cities have the revenue bases to address the inequality that we're experiencing, the poverty we're experiencing, and the lack of investment in our kids that we're experiencing.
So as a former county assessor, I started talking about reform of Prop 13 about 10 years ago. And it's something that is near and dear to my heart. And I was talking about reforming it, a piece of it that most people don't even know exists. Most Californians don't even know Prop 13 covers every downtown office building here in San Francisco. And that's the part of Prop 13 that we've been talking about fixing. Not the part that protects people's homes, but the part that really has really impacted us in terms of a revenue point of view, but really has created a loophole, a corporate loophole of sorts. And so I fully support that. I've been talking about it for 10 years. Glad you raised the question. It is long overdue. And again, from a revenue perspective, property taxes is the most stable source of local revenue. And we have really done a disservice to all of our services here in San Francisco because we really haven't closed that loophole.
Ditto.
Okay. And I will move to the middle now. What is your name? All right, Carla.
Goes to BMR reform. As much as we're building more affordable housing, there's not been a standard on like what it means to get a BMR and not turn it into a poverty trap. We don't have defined rules. For every apartment complex. We don't even know where these units are, and it's very difficult. Is there something that you're addressing within the state legislature as we build more affordable housing that we actually are addressing, the actual stipulations on how to get it, how tenants' rights inside of affordable housing with BMR units?
Well, BMR programs tend to be administered locally, and I know here in San Francisco, the oversight was not as strong as it needed to be, and we were seeing people subletting BMRs or purchasing for purchased BMR and then not living in it. And I know that the city has gotten more consistent and aggressive in actually enforcing the rules around BMRs, because we need to make sure that the people who are living in the BMRs are the people who actually need it, and that people aren't gaming the system. Yeah, and BMR is below market rate, also called affordable housing, that is affordable to a specific income range.
If I could answer the question in a slightly different way, Scott answered it very well on what locals can do. We don't have enough BMR units, below market rate units, and there's not a lot of administration to hold those accountable. And as you know, they're typically only eligible for low-income individuals by San Francisco standards. We need to expand this, and I'm often talking about the fact that there is a vast majority of San Franciscans and Californians who are being pushed out of the city who make a little too much money to qualify for low-income affordable, but do not make enough money to purchase or rent market rate housing. And I refer to this, and it's referred to in the public discussions as the so-called missing middle. And it is all of the folks in our classically sort of middle class who are being pushed out of the city, who are our educators and our first responders, who are our retail workers, who are healthcare workers, who are really all of us. And we're not building housing that I think should be below market rent for those individuals. And so we have a proposal We have a proposal to build missing middle production. We have to do this because if we don't, we are going to continue to be a city or continue on the trend, and our country, our state will continue on this trend while only those who are very poor or very wealthy can afford to live in the city of San Francisco. We've got to change that.
All right, I'm going to move over to this side of the room now. This woman here has been very patiently waving her hand in the green T-shirt.
First of all, thank you for coming here. I did graduate from Hastings 25 years ago. Thank you for being here. I feel like I'm hosting this event today. I have questions for all three gentlemen, if you don't mind. Number one, Proposition 13, I know you're looking at commercial properties. I would like to remind you that who are the tenants of commercial properties? Retails, restaurants, child care center, tutoring center, etc. If you raise the property tax on commercial properties, it directly goes to consumers. You raise the property tax because most leases are triple net. If you raise the taxes on commercial property, in restaurants, our meal will go up right away. Same way groceries will go up right away. So please keep that in mind that holding up the property tax on commercial property will directly into inflation, to all which affect all of us. And then estate tax, Scott, I have talked to you previously that if we assess an estate tax, which voted out by citizens in 1982, if we assess 40% as you propose, Californians will move our state. We are next to a state have no income tax and no estate tax, which is 3 hours in California. And then number three, Mr. Chiu, I have spoken with you previously. All economists agree that rent control kills housing. I think we need a balancing. Let me finish my sentence. Yeah, rent control kills housing. We want a balancing that we will attract the developers to develop more housing for everyone. And when they develop a housing, we can require them to give some BMR units for the low-income individuals.
Okay. Which one of you wants to take this first?
Could I just do the Prop 13 piece and all of my colleagues? So just to talk about the Prop 13 piece, that's actually not true. So yes, the leases are triple net. Right now, you see many landlords up and down the state get discounts because of their Prop 13 assessment, huge discounts because they're reassessed from 1974 assessment. The question to all of you is, do you see those discounts from those landlords right now? When you go buy your flowers, when you buy your coffee, when you buy your meals, can you tell which restaurants have Prop 13 protection and which ones don't? You don't, because what happens? Because they all charge the same price. So right now, if that change in taxation goes, you will not see a difference, because that's another scare tactic people are trying to use. But if you look at the numbers, and I say this, right, there's a Trader Joe's in Menlo Park. They have a 1978 tax basis. And I always say, I ask everybody from Menlo Park, do you notice, is a Trader Joe's selling milk at a much cheaper price than the Trader Joe's in San Francisco? Guess what? They're not.
So I agree. The Bank of America building should not get the Prop 13 protection that someone's home gets. Just fundamentally, I think that. One of the issues she raised was about, I have a proposal to create an estate tax in California for estates for a married couple, more than $7 million, $3.5 million for a single person, which, as you may know, 20 years ago, the federal estate tax exemption was $600,000 for an individual, $1.2 million for a married couple. Today, it's $11.4 million for an individual, $22.8 million for a married couple. The Republicans have been jacking up that exemption year after year to try to kill the estate tax, which is the most progressive tax. So I'm authoring a bill that would ask the voters to bring that exemption back down to what it was 10 years ago, Barack Obama's first year in office, $3.5 million.
And I will answer the question, the perspective around the fact that rent control, you're not a supporter of rent control. I respect your perspective, but I respectfully disagree. Rent control has been the one major policy in San Francisco that has protected some level of economic diversity in our city. Let me ask, how many of you, if we didn't have rent control, do you think would be forced to move out of the city? And let me also say this, I also agree that we have to build an awful lot more housing, and if we were able to do that tomorrow, maybe there's a conversation to be had, but the reality is we're not going to build enough housing in the coming years to protect the hundreds of thousands of San Franciscans that are one rent increase away from being forced out of the city. I have had hundreds of friends who've been unable to afford to live in the city. And my friends who have been able to have been in large part because of rent control. And so this is why I have been a defender of rent control. This is why I also support expanding rent control where we can, where there is hopefully going to be some legislative consensus around this. We have to figure out how we all can continue to live in San Francisco, and that should be the goal of our policymaking.
All right, thanks to all three of you. I'm going to move back to this side of the room, more toward the middle. Hold on. Wait your turn, please. This man here in the blue sweater.
Oh, thank you. Can you say something about what the funding mechanism is for the creation of a BMR? Because it seems to me that it's a pretty good solution to the housing problem, but we don't seem to have a lot of it. I'm wondering why.
I think it's funded in a few ways. One is through inclusionary zoning in San Francisco. Nearly 20% of the units in new development of 10 units or more have to be income restricted as below market rate affordable units. So that is one way of generating those units without taxpayer money. But in addition, we put public money into building affordable housing. San Francisco has an affordable housing trust fund where we take a certain percentage of property taxes that go in there and other general fund allocations. And then from the state, we just passed two bonds, Prop 1 and Prop 2, last November that the legislature put on the ballot to fund affordable housing at different income ranges. We also passed a fee back in 2017 to generate a permanent source of funding for affordable housing. And then Governor Newsom, in his proposed budget, which is a great thing, is proposing to significantly increase funding for affordable housing, including supportive housing for formerly homeless people. So it's a combination of developers providing below market rate affordable units and the public paying out of our taxpayer money to build that public housing.
If I could answer the question slightly differently, after the Great Recession, the state of California stopped investing almost $2 billion a year in affordable housing. So you add that up over the last 10 years, it's billions and billions of dollars. And as Scott just mentioned, we're starting to come back, but we're nowhere near close. And so this is why I think we need to expand the tax credit that allows affordable housing nonprofits to keep building the housing they're building. We need to bring back some version of tax increment financing, which is so-called redevelopment. And this is also why I propose that the Bay Area as a region, we need to raise revenues as a region. We've done this when it comes to transportation. We've done this when it comes to Bay Area restoration. But the fact of the matter is, and this is what's always a little heartbreaking for me when we have conversations here in San Francisco, we focus on our 7 by 7 square miles. We are surrounded by 100 plus cities, some of whom are doing their part, but many of whom are not building any units of affordable housing. And I think all of us as a region, our 9 counties, 101 cities, we have to say that we need to spread the burden of supporting affordable housing across all of our communities so that we can grapple with this as a region.
All right, I'm going to move to the middle of the room, and I am going to, sir, in the black shirt here and the beard. And we have a staffer running. He's getting his exercise in today.
Hello, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Jeff Vanderbrand. I'm a nurse practitioner working in a Sutter affiliate. I'm also a resident of the Outer Sunset. Mr. Ting and Mr. Chiu, I understand you both sit on the Assembly Committee for Business and Professions, and I understand that this week you're going to be talking about AB 890, which is authored by Jim Wood. Are you familiar with that bill? For the edification of the people in the audience, AB 890 will allow nurse practitioners to practice to the full extent of their education and training in order to provide direct access to healthcare delivery systems for Californians. About a third of Medi-Cal recipients right at this time have difficulty accessing primary health care. And what they do is they go to emergency rooms for coughs and colds and complaints that could very well be better treated in a primary care practice, but they don't have access to that care. I'm looking at the T-shirt of the woman here in front of me, and it says, of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. Thank you, ma'am. So as we increase access to healthcare, there's going to be a huge deficit in the number of providers that will be able to provide that vital care. So AB 890 will allow greater access to healthcare providers in California. So I would ask for you to support AB 890, and I would love to hear your opinions about it.
So at this point, we're still waiting to have the committee work with Assemblymember Wood around what changes may be, but just to talk about the issue in general, I've always supported as a member of the Business and Professions Committee that every member who is practicing, whether it's chiropractors, whether it's acupuncturists, whether it's nurse practitioners, physical therapists, doctors, dentists, that every optometrist, that they really practice to the full scope of their training. And really what that means is that they have the ability to perform healthcare, to provide healthcare to the full ability that they were trained. So I've always been very supportive of looking at different ways and how to better utilize and expand opportunities for nurse practitioners. What that means is for those of us, when we're trying to get an appointment with the doctor or trying to get our appointments, it's so hard because there are too few in this particular area, or they may not take the coverage that we actually provide, that it's really about trying to expand more people, more opportunities for us, and have greater consumer choice. So those are things that I've always been very supportive of. Thank you.
Thank you for that question and for bringing up the topic of healthcare. I think next to housing and homelessness, healthcare is a top issue for many of us. And this year, I've introduced a bill with my colleague Rob Bonta from across the Bay to expand healthcare options for all Californians, regardless of immigration status, and have been a supporter of single-payer healthcare in California. I also want to say, because you mentioned emergency rooms, I think many of you saw on the pages of our newspapers in the last couple of months too many stories of thousands of San Franciscans who, even though they had insurance, because they ended up at San Francisco General Hospital, would, for a couple of hours worth of time in the emergency room, get bills for $20,000, $50,000, $100,000, so-called surprise balance billing. And Senator Wiener and I have introduced a bill to say that if you're covered by insurance, if you end up at the wrong emergency room, you should not have to pay more than your co-insurance or your deductible to address that. But on this specific bill, as Phil just indicated, we're only just starting to understand the issues. The issue, as far as I understand it, is I know that doctors are opposed to this bill because they are concerned about the quality of care that could be provided. Nurse practitioners believe that they can provide that care. From my perspective, I want to make sure two things. One, we are maximizing access, so in other words, doing what is the most affordable way of providing this care, but doing it in a way that does not jeopardize care. I do think that the nurse practitioners have made a strong case on why your profession ought to do it. I literally asked my healthcare staffer yesterday to put me a briefing together so I can just get my head into it, but look forward to an ongoing conversation on this topic. Happy to get your materials. Thanks.
All right, I'm going to move to that side of the room. Anybody in the middle who has a question? The woman there in the white shirt on the end. Do we have a staffer making... There he goes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mia Carter-Blomquist. I'm a resident of the Portola, mother of three, business owner on the peninsula. And I'm concerned about Senate Bill 276. This is a very polarizing issue. It's in the media. But the precursor to this bill was SB 277. And
Please explain what that bill does for the rest of us.
So SB 276 is a current bill that's in the media which would remove medical exemptions for vaccinations for children. So in 2015, SB 277 was passed, where we all lost our philosophical and religious exemptions for vaccination, which is fine. But Governor Brown, when his signing letter specifically said that he's signing this, specifically amended to exempt a child from immunizations whenever the child's physician concludes that there are circumstances, including but not limited to family medical history, for which the physician does not recommend immunization. SB 277 explicitly provides an exception when a physician believes that circumstances in the judgment and sound discretion of the physician so warrant. So my two older sons have a medical exemption for Hep B because I chose as an acupuncturist to get the Hep B vaccine because I work with needles and I volunteer my time to the underserved. I experienced a severe reaction to that vaccine. I had a bleed in my liver, and my labs for liver function are still not normal 10 years later. So our pediatrician, who has been our pediatrician for almost 8 years, signed off for my sons to skip that shot in order to attend school. So Senator Pan it's hyperbole when he said, it's true that medical exemptions have tripled, but they have gone from 0.2% to 0.7, still under 1%. And when a child in that percentage, it doesn't mean that all the shots are included. It could mean that one shot is included, like for my children. I have a patient whose child received the chickenpox shot, seized in the office, right there. No family history of seizures, no history of seizures in the child. He seized for 2 weeks and passed away 2 weeks later. Under this bill, his sibling will not qualify for a medical exemption. Thank you.
So, as someone who, as soon as the bill is amended, I'll be going on as a co-author to SB 276, the vaccination bill. I respect your opinion, but I respectfully disagree. Vaccinations are one of the most important public health advances frankly, in the history of medicine. Unfortunately, we have a situation, and the reason why my colleague, Senator Richard Pan, who's a pediatrician, authored SB 277 to ensure that children who are attending school receive their vaccinations, because there are a very small percentage of children who, for actual health reasons, cannot be vaccinated. And then that child is going into school and they can't be vaccinated, and that there are other children who have chosen, their parents have chosen not to vaccinate them, and they are getting the measles or whatever else, and that could kill that child who physically cannot be vaccinated. And so it is a huge public health problem when we have more and more kids who are not being vaccinated and then going into public places, going into schools, and that's why the previous bill was passed, getting rid of the conscientious objection, where people, based on the personal belief exemption, with broad public health support. But now what we have seen, once the personal belief exemption was eliminated, a significant increase in medical exemptions, with some unethical physicians essentially selling medical exemptions for parents who simply don't want to vaccinate their kids. We're seeing an uptick in measles, these diseases that we finally were getting under control, and now they are coming back. So I support this bill. For the kids who actually have a medical problem, they'll still be able to get an exemption, but this will require that the Department of Public Health actually sign off on these medical exemptions to ensure that they're not bogus.
I'll just answer the question very briefly. As a father of a son who's in nursery school, this is a very difficult and serious topic for all of us. I was a co-author of the original bill because, again, looking at the data, It was not long ago where healthcare epidemics would wipe out entire populations, and all the science shows that you just need a few cases that create a tipping point within a community, and that's what we have to guard against. So I agree with Scott. On the one hand, we certainly, as you've just described your personal situation, that seems very valid to me as a reason why you should be allowed an exemption, but we need to keep the rule very tight. And as I think we're all reading in the newspapers, there has been an outbreak of measles. We have not seen an outbreak of measles in many, many years. And this is the type of thing that we need to guard against, because if we allow just a couple more percentage of our population to not be vaccinated, it actually creates a threat to all of us.
All right.
I'll just very quickly add that I completely agree with both of what my colleagues said. I have 2 young children in public schools right now, and it's very concerning when you look at what they're exposed to every single day, whether it's other kids. They're exposed to different illnesses all the time. And what's reassuring is that we're in an environment where primarily people are getting vaccinated, but if that changed, the thought of them being exposed to all these diseases, I think David was right. There was a measles outbreak at Disneyland, of all places, and you think about how many kids, how many millions of kids are going through that amusement park and how quickly a disease like that could spread in that kind of place. So this is absolutely a public health issue. It's not about a particular ideology. It's absolutely about science and data, and this is why we developed vaccines. The whole premise of a vaccine is that you need a certain level of population to get vaccinated to protect all of us, and that's really ultimately the goal. It's really about trying to make sure that from a public health perspective, we don't expose ourselves to these very dangerous diseases.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to this side of the room, but go to the back, and the lady there in the striped hat, that's you. You're turning around, but I'm pointing to you.
I have a question for Senator Wiener. I'm Teresa Flandrick. I'm part of the San Francisco Anti-Displacement Coalition. So reading in the media, Senator, that you had spoken with tenant advocates regarding SB40 and tenant protections, you did not reach out to anyone in our 28-member, organization-member anti-displacement coalition. So long-time tenant-serving agencies such as the Tenants Union, Housing Rights, etc. So my question is, why would you do that and then create legislation where you talk about tenant protections, but you didn't check with the people who are on the ground to see how are those tenant protections as ordinances actually working? How would this affect people in terms of using this legislation? That is my question.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And regarding the tenant protections in SB40, we did work with tenant advocates, and the primary coalition that we worked with was a coalition called ACT LA, which is a large coalition centered in Los Angeles to protect tenants and low-income renters in general. And they are in contact with a statewide network, and we worked with them, and they came, and frankly, they were very active in the version of this bill last year, opposing it. And then they came to me and said, we want to talk with you about protecting tenants under the next version of the bill. And so they, instead of simply opposing, they indicated a desire to constructively engage. And people have a choice. Some people, and for example, in San Francisco, there are some groups that just said we're categorically opposed. There are other groups who said we have an issue, but we want to constructively engage. And ACT LA constructively engaged, and we worked out strong tenant protections in Senate Bill 50, the strongest under state law, that if a tenant has resided in the property at any point in the last 7 years, or if there has been an Ellis Act eviction at the property at any point in the last 15 years, then that parcel is ineligible to be under the bill. You can't get a demolition permit for it. You can't get a density increase for it. And so it is a very protective measure to ensure that we are not incentivizing landlords to clear out their buildings, to use the Ellis Act, and so forth. And we have been criticized on the other side by people saying you went too far in protecting tenants, and I respectfully disagree with that. I think we were aggressive in these tenant protections, and I stand by them. People can agree or disagree with them, but these are robust, strong tenant protections to make sure that we are not clearing out buildings and tearing them down. They're absolutely enforceable. For example, Ellis Act evictions are a public thing. It's not a secret thing. We know where the Ellis Act evictions have happened. And there was actually a bill this year by Assemblymember Buffy Wicks of the East Bay to create a statewide rental registry, which is long overdue. And so it is enforceable, and with that legislation, it will be even more enforceable.
All right. Thank you, Senator Wiener. I'm going to go to the middle of the room, and the gentleman there in the red jacket with your hand up. Right there, standing up. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Caesar.
This will be our last question, by the way. I'm sorry. And then they have a chance to make some closing remarks.
Well, I've heard you all talking about criminal justice reform and reforming many of our systems. So I want to talk about two systems. In terms of the criminal justice, I thank your leadership, Scott Wiener, in protecting sex workers from arrests and condoms being used, to arrest sex workers. But I think as a state, we need to move. If we're going to be serious about criminal justice reform, we need to be looking at decriminalization of prostitution in order to actually save millions of dollars that the state is using to enforce these unjust laws. But also, I heard you also speaking about President Trump, or about leadership at the federal level and having funding for all of these, for housing, for business, for ending poverty. So I think it's very important that we protect our election system, especially since 2016 we had interference from foreign forces. So I'm here to ask that you support the Secure the Vote Act in California. This is a question to all of you, and I'll just leave it at that. Just kind of finding out if you're familiar with it and if you are supporting it, and if not, what are the reasons that you would be against something like this? That's really for government accountability, and yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up the work that we're doing to protect sex workers. I have a bill now, forgetting that, I think it's SB 233, that provides that if a sex worker goes to the police to report a violent crime, for example, we know sex workers are frequently victimized, the police can't then arrest the sex worker for sex work or drugs. We want to make sure that we're not sending a message to sex workers that if you report a crime, you yourself are going to get arrested. In addition, we've seen situations where sex workers who are carrying condoms on them, where the condoms are then used against them as evidence of sex work, which is an incentive not to carry condoms with you. So it's just a terrible situation, and the bill would ban all of that. And I do agree that we need to move towards decriminalization of sex work. It's just not productive. It doesn't help anyone. In terms of the Secure the Vote Act, is that the open source voting one? Yeah, open source voting. And I know we are all, I think we're all supportive of that. We've worked together to try to get money in the budget for open source voting. I know I worked in San Francisco to get funding for open source voting. Open source voting is, instead of having a private company that designs your voting technology, and it's a closed system and it's a black box, no one knows what's in it, and no one knows if it's being hacked or whatever, having open source where it's transparent and we believe more secure. So we do need to move in that direction.
I'm going to answer the question around criminal justice and open source in a few ways. First of all, I am one of the joint authors of the open source bill along with. And, as Scott said, given the threats to our democracy, given the threats to our electoral system, we have to make sure that there's accountability and transparency in how people vote. On criminal justice, I want to mention two things that our office is working on. One is in the topic of how poor people are penalized in a way that forces them further into poverty, and it involves a couple of practices around towing. So let me just mention, so there are many reasons under state law why your car can be towed for valid reasons. So if you are blocking a fire hydrant, if you are blocking the box, if you are endangering others with your car should be towed. But there are a couple of provisions that essentially penalize poor people for being poor. If you have been unable to pay for 5 parking tickets, your car can be towed. If you have an expired registration on your car for more than 6 months, your car can be towed. And the top reason, as you can imagine, why individuals would be in that situation is because they do not have the money to pay. About half of all Americans do not have enough savings to engage with a $400 financial emergency, and the typical tow costs at least $500. And so what happens when your car is towed for those reasons, your car is towed, it sits on the lot for 30 days, and then it's sold at auction. And when it's sold at auction, you lose your car, which means you lose your ability to get to the job, to pay for those tickets. You may, if you're an Uber or Lyft driver, lose your ability to have a livelihood. And if you're homeless, effectively living in your car, you lose your shelter. And so I proposed that the state of California eliminate a handful of towing provisions that are not working for us as far as public safety or transit, but are also causing people to become further cycled into poverty. And I think that's a conversation that we need to really start in the state of California. One other thing I want to, thank you. One other thing I want to say about criminal justice reform, we are going to have a conversation this year about ending private prisons in the state of California. And I am one of the co-authors of the bill that would do this, but more generally I'm going to say this, which is, it may seem a little different from the topic I'm just going to mention, but our Wall Street banks have failed us. And our Wall Street banks are funding these private prisons. They're funding gun manufacturers. I know there are a number of, we see moms demanding action around the issues of guns. They're funding fossil fuels. And this is why we are moving forward a bill, and I'm proud that Senator Wiener and Senator Ting are moving with me on a bill that would finally allow in the state of California cities like San Francisco to charter a local public bank. And again, we don't have enough time to talk about this, but if you're interested in working with us on that, please let us know.
All right, thank you very much. We are running a little over, so I'm going to give all 3 of our lawmakers a chance to give their final statements at this point, beginning with Assemblyman Phil Ting.
Let me answer the question first. So regarding criminal justice reform, we talked I talked about earlier my expungement bill. I also carried last year a body camera legislation that got signed into law to really make sure that we, the public, have access to body camera footage. It's what we pay for as taxpayers, and making sure that we have access to that information. I have follow-up legislation to ensure also that no facial recognition software will be used with body cameras, really to protect our privacy, because we want to make sure that, again, that this information is serving us, not surveilling us. In terms of open source voting, it's something that I've been very supportive of. I'm very open to the idea. The question is really what the best way to fund it is. Most of the funding that we've been doing through the state has been going through the Secretary of State's office, who then works with all the various county elections officers to ensure that there is election safeguard and their election improvements all up and down the state. So we want to make sure that that protocol continues to be followed and open to other different proposals that are piloting ideas. And so at this point, the coalition hasn't had a chance to meet with me. I'm very much looking forward to that conversation. And just to quickly go into my closing, first, let me just thank all of you for being here, coming through for a very raucous town hall. Clearly, this is really what makes San Francisco great. Everybody has very strong feelings, strong opinions about what they believe in, and that's really why I love this city so much. It's that people participate, they're active, they're knowledgeable, they ask us about a whole variety of questions and issues that we are working working on in Sacramento. I know that the three of us feel this way. We have the most informed electorate all around the state, and we're very honored to represent all of you. Having said that, we also need your help. There are issues that seem like common sense that at times face an uphill battle up in Sacramento. I'll just give you one example. I talked about much of the clean car legislation I've been fighting for. So fighting big oil makes a lot of sense in San Francisco. Fighting big oil is very tough in Sacramento, and I need your help. So that's something that we will need your help on. When we talk about criminal justice reform, you've heard the three of us all really taking on that issue in a variety of ways. And while it might seem like common sense here at home, it doesn't always seem like common sense in Sacramento. So we definitely need your help in that area. And really, when it comes to housing, homelessness, healthcare, those issues that we are fighting for up in Sacramento, we also need your help because many issues hit us here first in San Francisco. So we're very well versed in them, but they don't really hit our colleagues in LA or San Diego, in Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, up north, in exactly the same way. So for those issues and for those fights, so that we can make sure that everyone has access to housing, that we can work to really get people who are homeless off our streets and into a stable house, into a stable home, into a stable life. Those are things that we continue to fight for, but we're going to continue to need your help up there. Thank you.
Phil, can I please follow up on that? So what is the greatest thing that people here today could do to help you on things like that?
One is to really have much more participation up in Sacramento. So I know many of you come from different nonprofit groups or community groups. It's really having those community groups sort of band together and having a statewide voice. I know there was talk about sort of tenants, as well as there's a lot of homeless advocates here, senior advocates, but also people caring about health care. I think it's really important for you to be working with other community organizations, but having a much more vocal presence, having a continuous presence up there. You are all very active in City Hall, so I know David and Scott, as former supervisors, are very much used to all of you, seeing all of you, but when we go to Sacramento, we don't see you anymore. And I think that that's something it's so important for you to think about, and we're happy to talk to you and work with you on how to amplify your voices up there.
Thank you.
I would say something that everyone can do, because it's great to have strong representation from San Francisco and Oakland and parts of the Bay Area. But what's also important is you all know people around the state. And there are, even though there are some districts that may not be quite as progressive as San Francisco or the East Bay, there are progressives everywhere. And to get people to call their assembly members and to call their senators all over the state, that is highly impactful. I just want to say, in addition, that last year I was really honored to author and to work with a huge coalition, including a lot of people in this room, to pass net neutrality in the state of California. And I want to really thank you for working with us on that legislation and other pieces of legislation to move California in a good direction. We may not always all agree on everything, but we have enormous common ground in the work that we do, and you have my commitment. We'll continue to work together. So thank you for the honor of representing this great city. Thank you.
Let me just chime in with the ask for your help if you agree with us on any of the issues we have. The ideas that we are talking about, while they may seem mainstream for San Franciscans, are considered extremely progressive and lefty in the state of California. So if you think that we need to reform our towing practices, if you think that cities like San Francisco should be able to charter a public bank, if you think that tenants need further protections or the Bay Area needs to figure out how to fund affordable housing, we want to hear from you. We hope that you contact us, you work with organizations to sponsor bills, and you help us organize around the state. One thing I just want to mention substantively that we did not have a chance to talk about today that we did at the last joint town hall we did was the work that we're doing to protect vulnerable communities in San Francisco against what is happening involving the occupant of the White House. And there are a number of things that we're doing. I just want to mention, for example, our this is local, and I will explain why. We have transgender San Franciscans who are being outed because of student education records that have not been updated. So we have a bill that we're moving forward in that area. We have immigrants in our community who are being demonized by the White House, but are seeing that impact every day. And this is why we've proposed that the state of California, for the first time, establish an immigrant and refugee agency. Our women's reproductive rights are an assault right now, and we have so many women who around the state who are unable to get access to reproductive health options, and so we have a bill to move forward that agenda. And because of Donald Trump and Betsy DeVos, they have eliminated protections that students used to have from being targeted by predatory for-profit institutions. All of this impacts San Francisco students, but unfortunately, it is caused. I want to eliminate predatory for-profit educations. If I can, there are plenty of for-profit institutions that are actually doing a good job of educating, but I will tell you, 20% of our for-profit institutions are taking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars from our students and not providing them with a diploma that is worth anything. So they are literally being victimized, and we are ensuring more accountability around public schools as well. So I just want to mention this again. If this is of interest to you, please let us know. But let me just end by thanking all of you for taking time out on a Saturday. I want to take a moment and thank our amazing staff who are here. To thank Hastings, and then one final shout out to a great moderator, Thuy Vu. Thank you for pulling this together.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Scott Wiener, Assembly Members Phil Ting and David Chiu, and thanks to all of you for adding excitement to my morning. I live in the South Bay. We don't have raucous town hall meetings like this. So thank you for coming out. On behalf of KQED, thank you so much.